Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Straight Talk on 106.9 The XFM. I'm Bill Paul. It was just my birthday, and I have a good old friend with me, Rael Wienburg, who's been on this show before. He's been under different hats. I think last time he was talking about his video company, Raymar Video and Photo, and also he's been involved in all kinds of projects. Maybe we'll get into some of that on the show today. But today we're going to be talking about his TV appearance on Dragon's Den and what product he was convincing them to become partners in. And without further ado, here's our guest, Rael Wienburg. Rael, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Bill. And firstly, happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
I have to correct you.
Yes.
I wasn't on the show. 3 weeks before the end of the season,
Yes.
I was told my pitch would not be
Well, you were
shown
on this show. You're talking about Dragon's Den now.
on Dragon's Den, yes.
Okay.
So I was at the taping, and I'll give you the whole story in the next period of time.
Okay. Well, all right. So he was almost on Dragon's Den. And we're going to find out why. So, Rael, you've been a videographer. I also know you from the London Videography Club. I know you from the Directors Club. I know you from working with people all over the city and different events and charities. What made you want to be on Dragon's Den, and what product did you want to sell to them?
Well, that's a short question and a long answer.
All right.
Well, it was always my vision to put it on my bucket list. If I could find a product that would make sense, then I would love to have been on Dragon's Den. And last January, that's 2013, I was watching an episode of Dragon's Den, and at the bottom of the screen they showed auditions throughout Canada, but they mentioned London in 4 days. This was a Wednesday, and there'd be an audition in London on Saturday morning. And I first saw that and thought to myself, well, this is the opportunity. If ever I was going to do it, I must do it. And then I thought to myself, well, what am I going to pitch on the show? And I had no concept.
So you had no product at that time. You just wanted to be on the show, and you were going to come up with a product in 3.5 days.
That's correct. So I thought about it, and then something struck me from about 4 years earlier. My brother was in Singapore, and he was in a bar restaurant, and he was with a friend, and he noticed the waitress or the server coming to the table next to theirs, and she asked him, what would you like? And one of them said, oh, whatever. And the other one said, anything. And the waitress turned around and walked away. And my brother said to his friend, she's rude. I mean, why doesn't she ask what they really would like? Well, 2 minutes later, she arrived at the table with two pops, one whatever and the other one anything. So he sent that story to me, and I went online and looked at the trademark for Canada, and the trademark had been taken for anything and whatever. So I forgot about it. I wrote back and said, oh, good try, it's not going to work here. And then I was in a bar the next day, and something I noticed that people were offered or asked for another beer. Would you like another beer? Yeah, I'll have another beer. I'll have another beer. It was obviously a freak scenario, and that's all I heard for the whole evening. And at the time, when I got home, I went on the internet and did a trademark for another beer. And it had been not taken, but it had been reserved, and it hadn't been finalized yet. So I didn't think about it again until the evening, middle of last January. And I thought, let's go back to the computer. So I went back to the computer and I did a trademark, went to the Canadian Intellectual site, and I just couldn't believe it when the previous June it had been abandoned. So another beer was available, and I got quite excited because I really felt this could be a great concept to bring to the Dragons. So I initiated the trademark, and it took about a week to get the what they call finalized, which on the show they use the other word pending, or I think pending, or whatever they used, but the official word was initialized, so no one could take it unless they objected, and it goes through a process.
How much does it cost to get this initialized?
Actually, it was a fair amount. The URL was cheap, was $9.99 through GoDaddy, but the trademark was about $250. And I just felt at the time that it was worth it, even if it meant to invest in being on Dragon's Den. So I arrived there on that Saturday morning, went early because I somehow thought there'd be lineups, and there wasn't a big crowd. All in all, I think about 40 to 50 Londoners or people from the area gave their pictures to the two producers that were there, who were traveling throughout the country. There must have been about 2 or 3 teams. So anyway, about 10 o'clock that morning, my call came and I went into the room. And to backtrack a little bit, and this is not television, so we can't show the viewing audience, but I thought I had to bring something to the table. So I found 5 bottles of beer in one cupboard, and I created labels using portraits of each of the 5 dragons and called it another beer, very similar to the one that I'm showing Bill right now, and created a little box, a little hand carrier case. And
you've got the judges right on the bottle. That's a good way to suck up to the judges.
Absolutely. anything. And so I went into the little den that they had set up there for the auditions, and there you were allowed to use a cheat sheet. So I was quite comfortable reading my lines here. I'm looking for $30,000 and blah, blah, blah. I did my whole pitch and explained a presentation that I would have if I ever got onto the filming. I would do a presentation with a small team to show how another beer, the beer that is requested or offered more than in any other bar or restaurant, and it's not even sold. So that was my real basic pitch, and they giggled and laughed and shook my hand, and they said the usual, "Don't call us, we'll call you." And honestly, Bill, I forgot about it. But I had my opportunity. I went to the auditions. I haven't got any photographs here, but they had big signs, and it was a nice feeling to be in this environment, very professional, everything that they did. So I literally forgot about it, and I believe it was about the first week in March, I get the phone call. "Hello, is that Rael Wienburg?" "Yes, I'm one of the producers, Dragon's Den. We'd like you to come in to be filmed on April the 8th. And I almost freaked.
If he'd said April the 1st, you would have thought something was up.
Bill Paul, stop your nonsense. Anyway, not too many people knew about it. So it wasn't April the 1st, and I realized it was genuine. And I went into a state of shock because I hadn't projected actually doing it. So my first job was to find a team together, to put a team together to do the presentation, a little bar scene with a bar, and the server would ask, "Would you like another beer?" And each of the people at the table would say, "Yeah, I'd like another beer." At that point, I hadn't mentioned another beer in my opening pitch. It was just the amount, the percentage, and then I would say something like, before I reveal my exciting product, watch the presentation. So once they saw the presentation, then they would my server would hand each of the dragons one of these bottles that I had prepared for them, but I actually made up a different set. I couldn't use a Carlsberg bottle that I used for the audition. So that month was quite hectic in the sense that I was rather nervous or terrified to walk into the den, stand on the mark, and pitch. So I studied maybe a minute or two. I've never timed it, but my pitch, and it was difficult for me. And I'm not saying I'm old, but at my age, to remember it accurately enough to be convincing and not to stammer. And you had to. That was the crucial part of the whole experience in the Dragon's Den. In fact, and I'm going to mention the people that were kind enough to help me. Doug Croden from Anchor Video immediately said yes when I asked him. Carrie Stevenson from Stevenson Events immediately said, I'd love to do it, but then I needed a waitress. And it's difficult approaching. You want someone attractive. I found it very awkward calling people. So I happened to be talking to my real estate agent, and he said to me, he asked me, I believe you're going to the Den. Are you all organized? I said, no, the problem is I haven't got a server or a waitress. So he looked at me and says, my daughter works at the Morrissey. Give her a call. So I called Courtney, and she accepted immediately as well. So I was really happy I had my team. And in fact, we did a rehearsal the week before.
Did you have to build a set? Do you have to build a bar or bring one with you?
They are so organized. I believe, I was told, there are 100 people work on the set in all the different departments. And they had a team that purely looked after your set. In fact, when I wrote to, they gave me a producer who looked after me and maybe 10 other people who were pitching in that month. And a really wonderful producer. And she, when I told her what I'm doing, she said, leave it to us. And when the producer says that, you don't question it, and I left it to them. And so the time went by, and the nerves and the preparation. And finally on April the 28th, we left early in the morning. My registration time was noon.
This is in Toronto?
In Toronto, CBC Studios. So we got in the car, three of us. Courtney happened to be in Toronto visiting friends, and she met us there. I was so pleased that when we drove up to the CBC building, she was waiting for us there.
Now, I've been in the CBC building many times. It's a very nice structure.
Everything to do with it is first class, absolutely. So we were a little early. I gave ourselves at least an hour or two, just in case there was a problem on the highway. And we went to Boston Pizza for a lunch, early lunch.
Oh, you went to my restaurant.
Your
it's
restaurant.
Named after me. Bill Paul, BP, Boston Pizza.
Oh, yeah,
BP.
that's right, the big sign. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And Jim Treleving is one of the CEO of 400 Boston Pizza. So it seemed to be quite appropriate to have a...
Did you tell him that you had some Boston Pizza before you came to the studio?
Not then. Later on, I happened to speak to him.
Yeah, so who were your judges?
The judges were, let's get to that.
Okay.
So we entered the building just before noon. In fact, we had to parcel our lunch together because things were a little slow. And we took our takeouts, or whatever you call it, doggy boxes, with us, and we arrived there on time, registered, and then taken up to...
That would have been funny if you had to tell Jim Treleving, I'm sorry we're late for our appointment. We were at one of your restaurants and had to deal with your servers.
No, they weren't slow. No, I made a point in saying circumstances, and we all took time to order. So, no, they were excellent.
All right.
Anyway, so we arrived there and at noon, and as it happened, we were told almost immediately we'd be the last pitch of the afternoon set, probably 5 pitches. And we were taken to, I think, whatever the floor it was, huge. And they probably take up 4 floors for the studio and the rest of the facility all around the green room, as you mentioned earlier. So we went to our place allocated for us. We dropped all our bags and our lunches. And then for the next maybe hour and a half, the different production teams came to us. So it was a really exciting experience being in video production, as you know, Bill. It was fun to see how they organized things, and the team would come along and explain basically what we can and what we couldn't do. And then when there was a break in the actual filming, they took us into this incredible, impressive den and showed me my mark and showed the presenters where their desk would... At that point, nothing was set up for us because there were these other pictures happening where they would set up the bar and the table. And then we were herded out and also given instructions what we can and can't do. Like once a pitch is being made and accepted or whatever, you have to turn around and walk out. You're not allowed to turn around and wave, and there were a lot of rules. The pitch guide they sent me beforehand was about a 1/4-inch thick, which I studied cover to cover because I realized that this is your only chance that you have. And so once that sort of the business side of it was over. They put us into the green room, just a large room with coffee and donuts and stuff, and we had to wait about an hour and a half before we got the call for makeup. So we trod into the makeup area, and the other three went in first. There was no particular order, I don't think, and I was last, and it was quite hilarious. They put powder on the top of my head, and then
I just mentioned that Rael doesn't have a lot of hair on the top of his head,
None.
sort of like me. Yeah.
So she did the hair. Then she said, well, that's it. So I said, what about my face? And she looked at me, and there was this pause. Not much we can do there. But what she meant was, I think I was tanned and there was no reflection. But hopefully that's what she meant.
Yeah.
So everyone cracked up. And then the next thing we, just before we were herded to the bottom of the stairs that lead up to that gantry that you walk on, my producer took me aside and she asked me to do my pitch, which she hadn't heard before. And I gave him, I think I was, excuse the pun, pitch perfect. And she was very, she gave me a lot of confidence that I knew I was, at least if she liked it, then I'm sure the Dragons would be accepting as well. So then we heard it up the stairs, and she was actually looking through like a peephole at how they're preparing the room for us. And when it was ready, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and pushed me through the door onto that walkway, the silhouette walkway that you walk across, and then down these stairs. And then I walked to my mark, terrified. My knees were like shaking, and my presenters went to their little area that was set up, and I don't remember any of that. I mean, I just walked up to my mark and took a deep breath and then did my pitch. And I think, if I remember correctly, Jim interrupted me, and I stopped him and said, "Excuse me, you'll have time for questions later." My producer had warned me about that. And then I continued with my pitch and said, before...
And now I'm going to ask you the question I asked you before. Who are your judges?
Okay, the judges are the same. Not the judges or the business people are the same for the last 2 seasons. Jim Treleving from Boston Pizza, Bruce Croxton, Kevin O'Leary, Arlene Dickinson, and the wealthy barber David Chilton.
Now, of those 5, the wealthy barber has been on my show at least 3 times.
Excellent.
So I know one of them. But and I know Kevin O'Leary's leaving the show next season. And so there will be some new judges next season.
Well, there are 2 new judges, I believe.
And we've got about 5 minutes left in the show for you to tell the whole rest of the story.
Okay. So things happened during the show, fun things. Bruce went out immediately. He said, "I don't think this is something that I'm interested in, and I'm going out." Kevin threw questions at me, tons of questions, and I think I nailed them. I think the one question he said, so how much have you spent on this business? I said, "Oh, well, $258,000. So he said, $258,000? That's a lot of money for just a concept." So I said, no, $258. $250 for the trademark and $8 for the bottles that you have. And then there was just back and forth. And at one point, Bruce, who had gone out, turned to Kevin and said, those are details. In other words, we have a concept here. He hasn't worked out business arrangements, business plans or anything. And then Jim suddenly looked at me and looked at his pen and said, "I'll make you an offer." And I almost freaked. I somehow at that point didn't think I'm getting an offer. I thought they were just playing along. And he said, "Instead of giving you $30,000 and you accepting only 20% of the business, even though you're prepared to do all the work, let's go in as a 50-50 partnership." I said, "Okay." He said that night he was meeting the head of Labatt's and Molson at the Maple Leaf game. And he will speak to them, say, "Let's move forward as a partnership." And I just couldn't believe it. That's when I looked at my presenters, and they were like in shock. And then I stood there not knowing what to say. And then Arlene said, "Well, what about us?" So she and David said they thinking of buying a small mini brewery. They would like to make an offer, but they went back to my original offer. So I had a choice: David, Arlene, or Jim. Who would you think I would accept? So obviously I looked at Jim and walked up to him and said, "Jim," shook his hand, and as I said, we had to turn around and walk out, and just in total shock that I have a a 50% deal with a man who owns 400 Boston Pizza restaurants and is worth about $400 million.
So are you saying that Rael Wienburg, videographer, traveler, man about town, is now in the beer business?
I'm going to say no. You heard of the word due diligence?
Yes.
Due diligence took 6 months, back and forthing with his equal business partner. And in November, so this is April, in November I got the call that they've tried every angle possible, because they had to get a interested beer company, and that did not happen. And in the end, I did not get a deal. But I did speak to David Chilton after that to see if he's interested. And he said, well, if Jim couldn't do it, and then I don't think things were happening with their mini brewery, so that actually fell apart. But and I'll be quick now, because I know we're coming to an end. We're never allowed to ask them if we're going to be on the show or not. But they would give you 2 weeks' notice. And I waited till the second week in March. The season ends the end of March. And that's when I was told the pitch wasn't going to be on the show. And I was quite upset, because it was a classic, entertaining pitch. But I knew it could happen. But this experience... Oh, then they sent me these pictures as a thank you, but no thanks. Mm-hmm. And I had this wonderful experience. But I'm still interested. If anyone's interested in coming aboard another beer, I'm available.
I can't believe that they couldn't find a market for it, because it's a brilliant concept.
I totally agree with you. So anyone interested, this is definitely a marketable product. I just don't have the finances to move forward and do it. The problem with it, I believe, is that any company, whether it was Labatt's or Molson, to invest would be $2-3 million to brand, market, and produce, and they're not sure how long it would. Is it a gimmick that would last a year? No one was prepared to take that gamble, and I believe that's the reason. And the other reason why I think it wasn't on the show is that Jim only ties up about 6 or 7 of his maybe 40 or 50 handshakes on the show. So they go along and they pull out. They don't want to have too many pitches that don't go through, because at the end of the day you can turn around and say, no, we didn't make a deal. So that's possibly what happened. But it was an amazing experience I'll never forget.
And were any of the judges scary to talk to? Were they trying to...
Well, Kevin
O'Leary's got a reputation.
He's got a reputation, and I think I handled it. But when Bruce said this thing about, those are just details, but then Jim jumped in with his offer, and that sort of squashed... Oh, at one point, Arlene recognized my accent and said lekker, which in South African Afrikaans means wonderful.
But the same thing, I'm Dutch, and it means the same thing in Dutch.
Yeah, so she said to me, I didn't know what to say. She said, where are you from? Cape Town? And then she turned to the judges and says, you know what? South Africans are great business people and trusted business people. So she was really nice. And then she started singing an Afrikaans song, and I was about to join her. Then I realized there's not just 5 people watching me. There's going to be possibly 1 million people. So I hummed along with her. So if it came on the show, I wouldn't have embarrassed myself too much.
Oh. So what happened to that videotape? Do you get a copy of it?
No. Can you imagine them giving videotapes for those that don't get on the show? No, people would abuse it. I accepted I was crushed and accepted the fact that, because I had booked Boston Pizza on Fanshawe to show it that evening and invite friends and colleagues, and you would have been invited to join us watching me get a deal from Jim Treleving, regardless of the fact that it didn't pan out in the end. But it was an interesting 6 months of waiting to see if I was going to continue with my video business or not.
And how about the other people you had? Did you watch the other presentations, or were you in a soundproof room while you said you were the last presentation of the day?
Absolutely not. No, you're in your area, and then you walk into the den, and that's it.
So you don't get to see what else is going on.
Absolutely. I'd love to see a video of my pitch, but that'll never happen. Mm-hmm. Unless I get a deal. Then they may do an update from the previous season, even though I wasn't on the show. If I got a phenomenal opportunity, they could do that, but I doubt it. I'm not expecting it.
Mm-hmm. Now, the American version of this is Shark Tank.
Right.
And Kevin O'Leary's on that. might you cross the border and give the same pitch to the American version?
No, I love my wife too much, and I don't want to even attempt that because she went through all my anxieties, and I sympathize with her, and I totally understand that to try that, but you can't. You have to be American.
Well, we got 30 seconds left in the show. Is there any plug you want to make for this, or should we leave it at that, that it was an exciting experience for you?
It was a phenomenal experience, and I want to thank my presenters for helping me do what we did, and I regard it as a great success.
And you would recommend that people, if they're given the opportunity to go on Dragon's Den, to give it a shot?
Absolutely. You have nothing to lose, and they were very accommodating.
All right. Well, I would like to thank Rael Wienburg for telling us the story, and also Dragon's Den for being, I think, the most popular TV show in Canada, and giving people the opportunity to do presentations. I'm Bill Paul, and I think after the show I'll have another beer. I'm here with Rael Wienburg. Rael, thanks for being